She's one of the most powerful women in the UK.
There were no role models that looked like me. And something happened to me when I was about 4 or 5 that I think may have been the start of feeling I can do it. The teacher said to me, "Sandie, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Oh, I want to be a judge." And she turned around to me and she said, "I'm sorry, but little black girls from Balham don't become judges." I was not one who listened to your place is here, don't get above your station. But purpose means to me knowing what you want to do, why you want to do it, and whether or not you're actually doing it. And yes, sometimes people are born with a little bit more talent than others and maybe better at something, but they don't get to be brilliant at it without hard work. When I became General Counsel for the World Bank, so it's a very high position, and the one thing lots of people said about me when I was at the bank, "Oh, you're very humble," because with any problem, you can whittle it down to 1, 2, or 3 that you really need to tackle now. So what are those? Take time, take a breath, take a moment, trust yourself that you can do this.
Welcome to Power and Purpose. I'm Leo Mann, and I'm joined by my fellow co-host Will Trostikong for a podcast exploring leadership. And up until now, we've been focused on the world of sport. But today, we're going to be taking a step outside of our comfort zone to look at leadership in the world of law and finance. Sports fans, please do not disappear, as we'll be taking a deep dive into how leadership qualities go between the world of sport and outside of sport. And trust me, you don't want to miss this conversation because we have got a very, very, very special guest that I'm going to introduce shortly. But before I do that, Will, at the time of recording, I think your phone is probably red hot and blowing up right now because you've just shared the news about your retirement from international football. So yeah, I couldn't not mention that. It would be a bit weird. It's all still very new. So how are you feeling at this point in time?
It's been a roller coaster day, to be honest. A lot of emotion, but I've really been looking forward to this evening. I've managed to put my phone on silent and off for a minute because it was going off. But I know it's been great. I've had so many amazing messages from teammates, ex-teammates, all of them ex-teammates now, and other people that I work with over the years. And it's been really interesting. And I'm at peace with my decision. And I look forward to having some more time with family, but also, doing these lovely podcast recordings, for example, and many other things, as I still look forward to playing some good football in my club. It's been a big chapter and a big part of my identity for all these years. I'm looking forward also to speaking a little bit to Sandie about that and hearing about some of her journey and what's been like as a leader for her, because I'm sure that I can definitely learn some more and see how I can progress some of these skills and experiences that I've had into my next chapter.
Well, listen, well done on an incredible international career. We're going to talk about it some more, but not today. We're going to get Mauro back involved, and then we're going to give you a grilling on what's behind this decision, etc. We're going to do that in another episode. And you've already mentioned our very, very special guest, Sandie. So I'm going to give you a bit of background for those listening and thinking, Sandie, which is Sandie? Who is this Sandie? Well, listen, we've got Sandie Okoro OBE. She's one of the most powerful women in the UK. So we are delighted to have her on with us. And she has been General Counsel to the World Bank, to Standard Chartered, and also the Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. Like, it's a mad CV. We are so happy to have Sandie on. And let's welcome her on to Power and Purpose. Hi, Sandie. Thank you so much for joining us on Power and Purpose. Will and I have just been discussing your CV, and oh my gosh, it is out of this world. We are very, very fortunate to have you with us. How's your day been?
It's been a great day. Well, thank you for that intro. It's been a great day. I've been really looking forward to this evening. I think this is probably only the second podcast I've ever done. So,
okay.
It's great. I'm really, really looking forward to it. My CV, just, for me, I look at it and it just seems very ordinary, I must admit. So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, really?
It
You
is
know,
extraordinary.
it seems very ordinary to me, I must admit.
I mean, we've both been blown away by your CV, and we're going to get into your career, of course, in this discussion. And you know, for a lot of the sports fans who are listening, they're going to kind of be like, "Oh, right, so this is outside of sport. This is a really interesting one." But I know that you're a sports fan. You're a football fan, aren't you? You have a team. I don't know if you're allowed to declare that or not. But go on. Let's hear who it is.
I do have a team. Crystal Palace is my team. I live in Crystal Palace, so of course Crystal Palace is my team. When I was younger, because I was born in Fulham, Fulham was my team. But as soon as Crystal Palace made it to the Premier League, they were my team, and there's no going back.
Love that.
Love that. Love that. Will, have you played at Crystal Palace?
I have actually. I think that was my. Yes, I have. It was my last Premier League game for Watford. Yeah, we played there. I know Crystal Palace has always been a great team. We played against them in the FA Cup too. We won that game. We lost that last game in the Premier League, unfortunately. So that was your day, Sandie. I'll give that to you.
Yeah.
But no, it's always been a nice stadium. And I think, like you said, I feel like it feels like a real local club, local support. And yeah, they're doing amazingly well. So I'm sure you are a very happy fan.
Very happy. And I went, when they won the FA Cup, the celebrations locally were amazing. We went down the road and enjoyed all of that. I'm very proud to be. Palace fans are very loyal, so and very sort of family orientated. So that was really nice.
Yeah, and you also have the best smelling ground in the Premier League, because the waft of the jerk chicken that's next door comes over the ground. And I know about this. I probably know too much about this because they actually did the catering for my wedding.
Oh,
because
wow.
I
okay.
was so taken by the jerk chicken, and I know they do a lot of footballers kind of like summer parties and stuff there. I'm not going to give them a shout out because we're not getting paid for it, basically. But
the smell of jerk chicken.
It's such a lovely smelling ground, and as a Tottenham Hotspur fan, it's the only joy I get when I go down to Selhurst Park because we normally get beat. But Sandie, thank you for your time. We really appreciate you coming on the pod. We're keen to jump into your world and to understand how you've become this powerhouse in the world of law and finance. So we'd like to start by asking you around the theme of this podcast, which is purpose. So, what does purpose mean to you?
What a great question. I think to me, and this is a very personal, everybody will have their own view, but purpose means to me knowing what you want to do, why you want to do it, and whether or not you're actually doing it, which I think the last one is very important. I often say that to people when I mentor them. But that's that knowing what you want to do in the first place is not always the easiest thing, but actually assessing whether you're actually doing it is even harder. So I think that is purpose for me. There's one more thing I think for purpose, and that is probably, which has been a bit like that in my career, is making a difference as well. So you are making a difference as you go along, and a positive difference, not just a difference for the sake of it, but a positive difference. And I guess as well, which I wouldn't add necessarily, but only because of the way that my career has been, is that you are kind of, and I know I have been, role modeling for others as you go along. And I guess I would add that simply because of where I've been and what I've done, but you don't necessarily set out with that purpose.
And I kind of want to ask about that, because you're in your early life, in your career, did you already have this sense of purpose? And did you have any role models at the time which you thought, okay, I would love to become like them one day or exceed what they are doing?
Do you know what, Will? I think about this a lot. And so I was born and bred in the UK and grew up in the late 70s, early 80s as a kind of teenager. There were no role models that looked like me that I can remember. But I do remember I didn't feel like there was a lack of them, though, if that makes it. It's a strange thing. I didn't think, oh, there's a dearth of role models. It wasn't necessarily a term that was used a lot when I was growing up anyway. But you did see people, you were very aware when you saw another black face on TV. I'm thinking on TV in the media, right? So when Trevor McDonald reading the news, big deal, right? Everybody came downstairs, had to watch Trevor. It was like family. We called him Trevor, or like Rudolph Walker in Love Thy Neighbor, black actors on TV. It was a big deal, particularly he was from Trinidad, which is where my mum was from. And I see him now on EastEnders and I'm like, yeah, I remember you. It was a big deal you were on TV and acting because there were so few. And also, there were so few women doing things as well. When I was growing up, there were no female newsreaders. They came later, as I was in my teenage. It's hard to believe now. The first black footballer had not played for England yet, and I remember the storm when that happened. And should someone black play for England? What a big deal! Now nobody thinks twice about it. So there weren't those role models. But you don't know what you haven't got. So it wasn't that I missed out, but what there were and what there was, and I've recently come back from South Africa actually, was Nelson Mandela. And he was huge, even though we hadn't seen him for years. And still, when I was growing up, there was a younger photograph we had in our minds of Nelson Mandela. And that later image we have of him did not come until he was released from prison. But that younger was everywhere. And that struggle to end apartheid and to have something better for everybody was certainly something that I grew up with. So not a role model, but maybe a purpose, which is, the world is unfair. And when you grow up at a time when apartheid existed in South Africa and didn't seem to be going away, I had a real drive to change that and marched and did that. And so even though there might not have been the role models, there was still a lot of change that needed to happen. I think my role models came a bit later, actually.
So, Sandie, we like to dive into our guests' backstory, if you like, because it helps to unpack where the purpose and where the career decisions and the leadership qualities, values, beliefs come from a lot of the time. So I don't know if you can give us a sense of like where you grew up, when you first felt a sense of purpose in your younger life, that began you on this incredible trajectory that we'll explore as we go along.
So my father was from Nigeria, my mum was from Trinidad, and they met here in the late 50s, early 60s, and got married, and very different backgrounds and cultures. So they decided probably best to just stay here rather than have an argument where they were going to go back to. So I was born and brought up here in London, South London. I'm a Balham girl, was born and bred and brought up in Balham. Balham is now what people would call gentrified. It was very different when I grew up, but it was home. It was somewhere I enjoyed growing up. I reflect on these things, and something happened to me when I was about 4 or 5 that I think may have been the start of feeling I can do it. So in those days, you could put an advert in the local shop if you wanted to sell anything with your name and your address and your phone number. You'd never do that now, but you did. So my mum had, I think, a washing machine or something to sell, and she put an address in there, and she got a phone call, and I could see she was terrified, and she was locking the front door. And she was saying, it's a sex maniac. It's a sex maniac. Of course, I didn't know what a sex maniac was, but I realized this was not a good thing. And then there was a knock on the door, and my mum ran away and said, Sandie, come. And I thought, right, I'm going to protect my mum. So I went to the door and I said, go away, you sex maniac. And I don't know who it was, but the guy ran. My mum had called the police in the meantime, and the police came, and my mum was telling them the story, and the policeman turned to me and said, Sandie, you are a very brave girl. You scared away that man and protected your mum. And I'm like, yes, I did. And I think that was probably my first reinforcement that I could be strong and I could do things. And And I didn't think about that at the time, obviously, but when that, because sometimes you could have a very different reinforcement around there that could actually have said you should not have done that, and you'd have stayed behind, you should have stayed in your place. And from that, I thought that's one of the things where I realized I'm never staying in my place. My place is where I think my place is, and that was to go ahead and do that. So I think from a very, very early age, I was not one who listened to your place is here, don't get above your station, you know. When I was, another story, if I may, I was a little bit older, 9 or 10, and the teacher was going around the class. This was in primary school. Actually, no, I think it's more 7 or 8. And she asked everybody what they wanted to do when they grew up. And the teacher said to me, Sandie, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I want to be a judge, thinking this was a brilliant answer, right? And she turned around to me and she said, I'm sorry, but little black girls from Balham don't become judges. And at that, well, you say, yeah, but at that point in time, this was standard. She was probably saying, manage your expectations, blah, blah. But I thought to myself, wait 1 second. A, what do you know? You're not a judge, you're a teacher. And 2, if they don't, I'm going to now. And you're not, no one's going to stop me, right? I did feel a bit of embarrassment because, other kids were laughing in the class or whatever, but I didn't feel I couldn't do it. It was almost like a challenge. And I've got this stubbornness in me that some of my team always said I work with, never tell her no. Never say no, because she's going to then want to go and do it. So anything like, no, you can't do this. Oh, this is going to be too difficult. I'm straight at it. So I think that attitude came from young. I think it goes back to that moment when it was reinforced by someone in great authority, like a policeman who said I was very brave, that I believe I'm now very brave and so could do brave things.
Amazing.
That is amazing. And I mean, listening to you, Sandie, like 4 or 5-year-old, like having that energy and having that sense of confidence. It feels like it's almost innate. It's almost like it was within you. Is that fair to describe? And would you say, because often when we look at the development of our characters, people often refer to their parents or the people that surrounded them at that time or their environment that helped to shape them. Would you say any of those kind of elements?
I think Leon probably was and is innate. And as you were asking that question, it reminded me that was the only time I ever saw my mother not be brave, actually. So I had a great role model in my mother in that she was always, don't let anybody else's small opinions of you become your small opinions of yourself. So she was an incredibly brave person and very forceful person. That was the only time I ever saw her a little bit frazzled, and understandably why. But so I did have that role model. And my father, I was an only child as well, growing up in London. And they really encouraged me to do things that forced me to challenge myself in a way, right? They never kind of held me back from doing things I wanted to do by saying, oh, you're a girl, or black people don't do this. None of that. It was like, oh yeah, you want to, whatever it is, you want to do, you can do it, and just work hard. Basically, the old mantra from the parents from Africa and the Caribbean: work hard at school, get those results, etc., etc.
Very
so I
familiar.
do think it's very familiar. Like there's only 3 professions, doctor, lawyer, or both. So but so I had all of that, but I do think that even if it's innate and you grew up at the time I grew up in, where there was a lot of racism, but it wasn't necessarily overt, it was kind of below the surface, where people just underestimated you again and again and again, what you could do, etc. That can often chip away at that innateness, right? And and my cousins who grew up in the Caribbean or grew up in Nigeria, where you had people who were black doing all different jobs, right? And you were seeing all different things. I didn't see that around me. And so maybe I had to be a little bit tougher to keep that within and imagine it. And one thing I did have, and I always had, is real vision. And it really struck me. And I think the maybe it's the time I was born, but that all the things people said would get in your way later weren't those things, and that how life changes, and that when that you go back to that teacher, and maybe if I turn around and said to her, actually I'll go and become senior vice president at the World Bank and Chancellor of the University of Birmingham, etc., etc. I know you're coming on to my career story later. She'd go, "Oh, that's more realistic." I don't think so, But those sorts of things were not something I saw anybody doing or could do. But I had a vision. Life was not always going to be like this, and I say that even now, all the things we think are limitations now will not necessarily be limitations in the future. They'll be something else. Because I've seen life change so much. And as I said, I was in South Africa recently, and I went to Soweto, and we had a guide showing us around, and he said he was born free. He was born after apartheid ended. And of course, so he didn't live under apartheid at all. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing that you have now got a generation, maybe a second generation even, who have not lived under apartheid. Yet I remember it so clearly as something people were saying you will never get rid of.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing of your story, if I'm listening to you speak now, is, like you said, your vision, but also all those challenges that you would have seen and maybe not even have processed have given you this real drive. So maybe on your subconscious, you've managed to turn this into something so positive that's propelled you so far. And I think that is a real lesson, because when you are 5 or 7 or 8, when you have that conversation with your teacher, I think it can even turn out one or two ways. And if you take that to heart, and if you believe them, and you can't see past that, without the independence that you might have got, and also the encouragement from your mum, that is something really special. And I think that's probably, I don't know if I'm guessing, but I think one of the big driving forces, or one of the reasons why you got such a drive force, even in today's position, where you say that people don't want to say no to you because they know the challenge is coming after.
Yeah. And I think, and I get great support from my dad as well, which is very, very important. Although my dad had to kind of listen to my mum, if you know what I mean. But and my mum was a nurse, and her father didn't want her to be a nurse, and she didn't listen to him. She left Trinidad and came to be a nurse. So I think she understood the drive. I wanted to be a lawyer from very young, and she understood that drive and really supported it, and didn't ever once tell me how difficult it was going to be, or how difficult it would be to succeed in what was, and to some extent almost still is, a very sort of white male environment. But I think for me, my vision was never stuck at what I was seeing in front of me. My vision was always what I could be, and where I saw myself going, and the difference I could make. And maybe, when you're much younger, it's pure ambition, right? Just to be the lawyer, and, to get the qualification and be a lawyer, and then, be practicing as a lawyer and seeing yourself as that. But maybe because being a black female growing up in London, there was a lot more drive to that than I probably realized at the time, because that was not the norm I saw around me. I did not ever see any other black female lawyers portrayed on TV, doing jobs in the UK. I knew of them outside, like some of my relatives in Trinidad and their friends, but not in the UK, and was not portrayed like that at all. It was never portrayed like that at all.
So did you go out and then search for those opportunities if you couldn't see that was something that was right ahead of you? Or how did that look at that time, to be, okay, this is what I need to do, these are the qualifications I need to get, and this is the pathway I need to walk to get to where I want to get to?
I think because I saw what lawyers could do, right? So I knew, looking at apartheid and looking at some of the fights lawyers had made to get rights for people. That's where I wanted to be. I originally wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. So I could see from history, say in America, what lawyers had done, and I could see what they were doing in South Africa and what they were fighting for. And it was all about rights, and rights being enshrined in law. Right. And and the importance of that. So I think that's where that came from for me, Will, which was thinking, that's, it comes back to your original question of purpose. The purpose was the difference I could make, and the difference I wanted to make, fighting for those rights. That isn't what I ended up doing, civil rights law at all. But that's what I imagine myself doing.
I think that's also a normal part of progression, right? Because I think as a 7-8-year-old, you might think this is what you want to do, but then life obviously happens to you and you might find a different course. But I'm sure that drive and that start and also that ambition served you well, because afterwards maybe you went on a discovery journey, which I'm sure we're going to unpack shortly. But to then think, okay, actually I want to head into different directions, but at least still reach as high as that or beyond.
Yeah. I love breaking a glass ceiling, I think. We'll come on to that. But if it's there, I've got to not just break it, but I've got to smash it.
Sandie, I love that. And look, listening to you, I'm thinking about our community of listeners who are thinking, right, okay, how can I practically kind of take some tips from Sandie's journey from being an ambitious young woman, young child, through to kind of pushing towards what we're going to come on to very shortly in terms of being General Counsel for the World Bank. So, are there any practical tips for our community in terms of moving from being a young person with great ambition and vision to actually kind of keeping on track and getting to a place where you're on the cusp of something very special?
Yeah, I think so. I think you often have to break it down into its constituent parts. So if I look at sort of my journey and what I wanted to do, the first hurdle is passing all those exams. I say that to people I mentor. You can have a big dream, but buckle down and get those exams and pass those, right? Because without those, the rest of the dream doesn't exist. So work out what it is you need to do. And say, for example, that in football, that you have to go out and you have to practice. You have to give up seeing your friends. You have to do all of that. There's always a price to pay. And it's usually what's called working really hard. So be prepared to work really hard. Nothing that's worth having comes easily, I have found out. And everybody who is successful has worked really hard for it. It doesn't look like it when they're successful. It looks like, well, that was a breeze for them, etc. And it was all the talent. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't work hard, it means nothing. So there's the first constituent, is be prepared to work really hard. Ignore all the noise about you might need to work harder than someone else. So what? It's all hard work, right? And it's probably marginal how much harder you'd have to work than someone else, because it's all hard work. And it doesn't matter what it is you want to do. Start your own business, be in sport, be a lawyer, whatever it is, there will be the hard work. The next bit that I think is really important as well, the hard work is not enough. You're going to need other attributes that are equally as important. So the hard work will get you the skill or the intelligence or whatever it is you need to do the job. The next bit, and I'm writing a book on this, actually, on leadership. The next bit are the 5 things I think you need to succeed alongside that, which are never taught to you, but you really need them. So you need confidence, you need resilience, you need to embrace your fears, you need kindness and authenticity. And those 5 things are really important. So you can be born brilliant, you can work at your brilliance, you can work at your sport, but if you really truly want to succeed, you're going to need all those things alongside to have a very long and successful career. And I break those into the 2 constituents. It's like a horse and carriage. You can't have one without the other, kind of thing. And you need those 5 things alongside. But those 5 things are not taught to you. You learn those in time, and we can unpack those a little bit. But you learn those as you go along, and you learn the importance of them. And if you can combine the 2, that will get you to where you need to get to. And I've seen in my time many people who rely often just on skill and just on intelligence and think, well, why am I not getting there? Because they haven't got the other attributes, I think. And you need those 2 things. So it's very important that you have a combination of those. And if you do that, you will get far. And I find it impossible to think of anything where it just lands in your lap. The only time I can think that is if you inherit something, but even then it's not you having achieved something, you've inherited it. But for you to achieve something, you need to do those two things. And that's why I like to break it up, because into the hard work, the working at it, what is it you need to do to get to have an ability to do something? And yes, sometimes people are born with a little bit more talent than others and maybe better at something, but they don't get to be brilliant at it without hard work. I mean, Usain Bolt didn't say, I can run fast, I don't need to train, did he? He trained and he trained and he trained, and it's the same. You want to be a lawyer, you want to be a footballer, you want to be an actor. I used to be on the board of the RSC and saw some of our actors rehearsing and everything. I thought, gosh, that is hard work. You've got to learn one play in your head, you understudy for another, and you're going to auditions. Everything is hard work. Can't get around that.
So if I want to just relay that because when you speak about some things, I had some great influential coaches that in my early age, when I entered academy football, they hammered on the 10,000 hours to become a professional, to master a skill. And when I hear you talk about your journey and also describing what it's like when you're talking to some of the people that you mentor, that's one of those attributes, or maybe the first courage that you talked about. And secondly, when, I've seen it where players as footballers are very talented, they work very hard. But if we talk about that next level where they might think about leadership and leading a group and having longevity, you mentioned kindness, which I don't think is mentioned very often. And I think it's such a underrated skill because I think that's also maybe part of the journey of being selfless and then understanding that you can add more to other people that's going to also benefit you in the long term. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how you would talk about that and for people to understand what that means, not just being saying hello and maybe asking people how they are, but what does kindness look like for it to become a skill and something that you mentioned translate maybe into great leadership or into a position that you are in now?
So kindness, I always usually put that last. I can't remember what order I just did it, but it's usually because it's certainly not least. And it's the one people, like you said, will often forget. And for me, it's kind of like, you're not your job title, right? Because anyone can have that title, right? That title will go on to the next person, the next person, and the next person, right? So thinking you have the power that comes with that is a big mistake. Right. And wanting power, again, is a big mistake. What you can really have if you are a kind person is influence. People will follow you and will want you to. I always think, would people still want you to be their leader and think of you as their leader even when you don't have that title? Because that's when you are a true leader. Right. Anyone who knows you're paying their salary, you're doing their appraisal, you can work out whether or not you're putting them in the team. They're going to be all over you, right? They're going to be nice to you. They're going to tell you whatever you want to hear, right?
Oh, yes.
But, oh, yes. Because, we're human beings. But when you don't have that power, are people still seeing you as a leader? Are people still seeing you as someone they want you to lead them, right? And that, I mean, I am not comparing myself to him in any way, shape or form. But if you think of Nelson Mandela, he had that. Right, when he was president of South Africa, but when he stopped being president, he was still a leader. He didn't need that title to lead. And for me, that's what I look at. I look at him and I think that is leadership. I don't want to spend 27 years in prison to get there, but again, that is pure leadership. Everything he did was pure leadership. So that kindness, and he embodies that kindness, right? He embodied that kindness with the Truth and Reconciliations Commission or whatever, is seeing everybody else as a person and each person is equal to you. And you are not above them. And this is what my mum told me. You are not above them. You are not below them. They're right beside you. And one day that person may be your boss and may have that influence over you. And they'll remember how you treated them. So with respect, with dignity, you have to be humble and That is a really important attribute, is that you don't, if you have to exert your power, then you've lost it. And then there's a great line from Game of Thrones, which I'm a great fan of, where a character says to one character, so it said to Joffrey, if you have to say you're the king, then you're not the king, and when you are in positions of power, often people forget kindness and they see it as a weakness. And it is not. I think it is power in action, actually, because you have the power to be kind. It doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, right? Doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, but you can deal with difficult things with kindness, with grace, with putting yourselves in the other person's shoes. Kindness and empathy do go together. And it's so important, I think, for leaders now. In this sort of post-COVID world, people realize this is a really important part of leadership, that being tough and do as I say and doesn't work anymore. And it certainly doesn't work with sort of Gen Z generation either.
It's so interesting because as of today, this podcast will come out a bit later. I just retired from international football this afternoon, so it was a big change for me, a bit of an emotional day. But I think why I'm bringing that up now is because your words speak to me a lot. Because I think for me, on my humble journey, it has been the latter years where I had to learn so much about that part, and I think it's so great that you actually brought it up, and that's why I wanted to understand more about it, because I've also seen what that's like. I think football is a sport, a world which so many things can be taken out of, which can be very effective in different settings, whether we're talking about business or politics, all the kind of things that we discuss in this podcast. But I had a role as being a captain of a team. And for me, like you mentioned also with the Gen Z and things changing, in 10 years' time, I went from a young player to a senior player, which still sounds a bit ridiculous at 32. But all of a sudden, I saw there was a big change also in how people react to what you say. And when I came in, we had very authoritative figures that I looked up to as role models and leaders of the team. And as my role kind of progressed, and especially in the latter stages, the most recent months, I had phases where I didn't play. And all of a sudden, I realized that the kindness that I shared and encouraged other players with meant that my voice was maybe even more powerful, not from a position where people had to respect you because they might feel, that's the player that's there on the pitch or describing it, but maybe taking a step back. It taught me so much in the last months, how much that can actually help, because when I saw some of my messages from my now ex-teammates and also the leaders that stood up and now moving on with the team, those are the things that they remembered most. It wasn't necessarily the moments where I would try to give a hammering or really stand above a group, and sometimes I caught myself maybe doing that because I felt like that was part of my role and that's what I needed to do. However, the moments that people seem to remember the most were always the moments where I wasn't doing that from that position and maybe thinking broader, and actually helped people respect me more and gave me a greater voice. So it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because I think as a young man, and I think anyone listening, young woman, that is part of a journey that you'll go on, especially if you want to aspire to lead in whatever field you want to be in. So I think those are great words about kindness, and definitely an attribute that can be forgotten if you are trying to achieve or aspire for great things.
Yeah, I remember I was at the World Bank, and this was during COVID, and I'm a single mum. And someone in my team, I was just chatting to, I think, by the coffee machine, or maybe we were just having a one-to-one. I can't remember what it was. But she was very concerned, like many single parents were, what would happen to their child if they became sick. Never mind, anything terminal, but just sick, and maybe had to go into hospital. And we were just chatting, and I said to her, look, don't worry about it. She can come because the thing was, if your parent had COVID, people might be afraid to have the child in their house because they could be having COVID. So it wasn't just the normal sort of situation. And I said, oh, don't worry. She can come and stay with me. It'll be fine. You don't have to worry about it. She'll be fine. And when you recover, she'll come back. Now, this didn't ever transpire. But afterwards, she came to me, and when I was leaving, she gave me a beautiful gift. And she said, that was because you were so kind to just say that. from someone who was sort of her leader to just say that it wasn't even that she ever expected me to carry it through, if it sounds, but I would have done. I would not have said it if I wasn't prepared to carry it through. But the fact that she was in a situation where no one else had said that to her, and I had said that to her, she was saying just how kind it was and how much she appreciated it, and it took a weight off her shoulders. What I was thinking in the moment I said that is I was completely in her shoes as a single mum, thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know. I've thought about the fact I would want someone to say they would take my child. So I'm going to say that because that's what I would do. And I wouldn't worry if you're going to catch COVID, let's all catch it together, But you can't leave a child on their own who's worried about their parent being unwell. So I said what came naturally. And I think sometimes when you're in leadership, those sorts of things you don't actually say when you should say that. And you should be in a position to make people in your team feel safe. But I didn't realize what an effect that it had. And that's one of the things I remember about how, some kind words at the right time can really, really make a difference. On the flip side, sometimes maybe you got to be realistic with people in other ways where you might have to say things that are difficult. And things that are, and I'm sure you've both done that at some point, right? Telling people they haven't made the team, telling people, but you can sometimes just saying it as it is can be kind as well, rather than, avoiding it. That's the other thing you see leaders do. They avoid saying some of these things, and that's unkind too.
So for now, if you talk about your position, obviously you've had many senior roles. You went from global banks to world banks. How do you keep yourself grounded and not maybe carried away with those titles that you would get?
Oh, you know what? Let me tell you a story. This is so good. So, when I became General Counsel for the World Bank, so it's a very high position in the World Bank. I was the most senior Brit at the World Bank. I was, in the top leadership. My boss was the president of the World Bank, and I had to move to Washington, D.C. Just before I moved, I had been given a prize by the Black Solicitors Network for my a leader in law kind of thing, a really big one. And I went to the ceremony. It was a bit of a surprise. Anyway, something very unusual happened. And as I was standing out and loving my award and loving the fact I was going to go to Washington, D.C. and be the General Counsel, it was going to my head a bit. This couple came up to me. And this was a very formal black tie do in the city. And they said, can we say a prayer over you? And I thought, well, this is a bit strange, but let me just say yes. And you know what they did, Will and Leon? They prayed that I would be humble. They said, she's going to need humility in this job. Please don't let. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'd never thought about that. And that stayed with me when I got to the World Bank. And I thought, stay humble. Right? Because the reason I've got this job is not because I'm brilliant and I'm all this. I have a job to do. And I don't know what that is yet. Because the universe always puts you in positions where you need to do something and you're in the right place at the right time. And that prayer of humility, I've never, ever forgotten. And it stayed with me. And I've always reminded myself, stay humble, stay humble, stay humble. Right? Don't let, that you're not your job title. Don't let that go to your head. And the one thing lots of people said about me when I was about, oh, you're very humble, in a nice way, not in a, Uriah Heep kind of a way, but in a humble way, is I didn't let that go to my head. Working at the World Bank was amazing, and you are treated with the same level as I would have been had I been an attorney general or equivalent as that when I traveled. I got all the outriders and the diplomatic protocols, and just like the president of the World Bank gets presidential status when he travels overseas, I got the status of the most senior legal person in the country, and etc. So that could go to your head really quickly. You're never carrying your own bags. You don't even carry your own passport. They take it away, get your bags, do with you all the diplomatic. You have a quasi-diplomatic passport, etc. Very nice, going through security, that's for other people, but you have to, it would be easy in a situation like that, to let it go to your head. And I think bringing yourself, I used to do small things, and sometimes it used to annoy people because that's not what others do and they didn't quite know what to do. But one of the things I would try and do is a really simple thing, is that you always sat in the back of the car, right? You were driver, sat in the back of the car. And you can't see anything when you're in these amazing countries in the back of the car. So when I could, and security would let me, I would sit in the front of the car, and everyone was like, oh, just sitting in the front of the car, you know. And once we were in Kenya and we had this outrider and his motorcycle, and he was doing all these tricks. I could see him doing all these tricks on the bike. And when we got to where we were going, I went towards him and he thought he's in trouble now. I could see the look on his face. And I said to him, oh, can I sit on your bike? You were brilliant. And he couldn't believe it. And I've got this photograph of me sitting on his bike and talking to him. And that was just like, you know, I wanted to do that. So I'm going to go and do it, you know, and not thinking I'm above all of that. I need to sit in the car before someone opens the door. You know, there's some things for security you have to do, and I understand that, but I just didn't want it to go to my head. And that prayer of humility, which was exactly what I needed at that time, but I didn't realize it did keep me humble, because you really have to, because, you know, otherwise you start thinking, you know, you really, you know, it's about you, and it's not about you. It's not about you. It's your position.
Wow. And Sandie, I mean, being at the World Bank, you know, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
You know, the decisions that you're making, you know, are literally, like, you know, they're not impacting something locally, regionally, like globally. So,
yes.
So what did you learn during your time in that position about yourself and about the pressures of global leadership, and how you manage and push forward with purpose in that position?
So, Leon, one of the things I learned is you have to listen, right? You have to listen. So often when because I was at that level, so all the most challenging and difficult issues got pushed up to me for a decision or for input. So you're a real decision maker. You really are. And the reason it's come up to you is nobody else could make a decision by then. So, you know, because it's quite difficult. But you have to listen before you jump in with that, because it's very easy to jump to a conclusion, say it's sorted, etc. But listening to other people's point of view so you can inform and make an informed decision. That's what I was going to say. Informed decisions are really important. Still your decision, you own it totally, but be informed and listen really carefully. Because sometimes at that senior level, when you're super senior, people don't tell you everything. They really don't tell you everything. So it's really important to form relationships outside of that and talk to people so they feel they can tell you things and they feel it's a conversation, not I'm going to talk to the headmistress and I need to have all my notes. It's got to be, we have a problem. We really need to talk to you and blah, 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 blah. So because you need to be well informed and you can't afford to miss anything at that level. So I think it's really important to form really good working relations with people throughout. And people should never be afraid to walk into your office, should never be afraid to talk to you or whatever. And I you know, you're very busy at that level. But I used to make a real point of, I had my team on 3 different floors, and I used to make a real point of, I would go and walk around the floor and say hello and how are you doing, which I think not previous General Counsels hasn't done, understandably so. But this was a new thing, and the first time I did it, everybody jumped out of their office. Everybody thought something was wrong, and by the time I left, everybody was like, "You haven't been around the floor for ages. We miss you." It just became the norm. It just became the norm. But I think that made it easier to approach when things are difficult. But as I said, really listening. But listening, you have to people have to be telling you what they need to tell you as well. And that you need to build up from the beginning, trust. I think as well, the other thing is you also have to trust your own judgment on things as well. And recognize that you have to make a decision. You are there to make a decision. You're not there to pass that decision or delegate that decision or waffle. That is, I mean, you know, that's there's always going to be at that level one major problem or two that erupts that is going to fall in your lap. And it's your that is your job at that point in time to do that, really. The rest of it is fairly routine and ticking over. But when there's a big problem, don't run away from it. Run to it, run into it. And I think going back to the policeman who said, you're really brave, blah, 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 is that I'm not afraid to run into it. I'm like, oh, I love that. Give me the problem. I love sorting a problem. And the worse it is, the better it is. And I've been, at times when you're there all night, pulling an all-nighter, sorting stuff out. You've got to deal with the press. You've got to deal with all sorts of things. And I thrive under that pressure. And I think that's the other one, is being able to thrive under pressure. You can't have it all the time, but it's really important. And I'm sure, as sportsmen, you get that because you're under pressure all the time, right? For me, it's slightly different. But when you are under pressure, you have to perform. Your whole team is looking at you and you have to do things that are difficult. And don't run away from it. Run to it.
Can I ask you one thing about that? Sorry, Sandie, to stop you there. Because I think the first thing you mentioned about people not looking at your title as a reason maybe not to tell you everything probably comes down to your kindness initially, and also you maybe not putting that title up on a certain pedestal, which makes people respect your aura in that sense. So practicing what you mentioned before. But secondly, I think about making those difficult decisions and facing storms head on and attacking that to get through there. You mentioned also in sports, but I think in sports it might be slightly different because you learn that over the years, because you're going to fall a lot of times before you understand how you have to deal with different situations, or even if that's on the pitch or whatever happens, right? But I can imagine if you are in your position where you are now making such executive, global effective decisions, it must have been difficult. And how did you get that confidence to trust your gut at that feeling? Was there a moment where you said, okay, I had enough practice, or what was those things? Because you might have had difficult problems where you said, okay, I would love to phone a friend or find out something else, but how did you say, ask the audience.
Yeah.
How do you grow that confidence to say, okay, actually, I'm going to trust my feeling here, and if this is wrong, it might impact a lot of people and a certain, perspective maybe for you might be changed. But how do you go about that, and how do you learn that?
Well, there were many situations, I think, throughout my senior career that I've been in that situation, certainly at the World Bank. But firstly, I think you have the experience. That's the other thing. So you have years of experience to draw on, where there may be similarities, not similarities, but you have got experience to draw on, right? So somewhere deep down, you will have seen something like this. Maybe you weren't dealing with it, but you saw somebody else deal with it, or you've had the experience of dealing with something similar, or there's at least an emotion you can draw on that is similar. But they will always be new, and you will always be the first one to be dealing with something quite like this. The first thing is just to stay calm, right? Is just to stay calm and actually work out, I say this to everybody, what the problem actually is. Because with any problem, they may look like there's loads of them, but you can whittle it down to 1, 2, or 3 that you really need to tackle now. And if you don't, then it's going to be a disaster. So what are those? Take time, take a breath, take a moment, trust yourself that you can do this, right? That you can do it. You've got the experience. You have, and this is almost where the job title comes in as well. Okay. This is where the job title is useful. It is your job to do this, right? And you are this senior person. So they do have to listen to you, right? That's when you go, yes, I'm the General Counsel and I'm telling you this is what we need to do. That's when you use your job title. That's when you use it effectively, right? Which is, I am the General Counsel. This is my decision. Or this is my advice, because sometimes you're not always in a decision-making capacity. This is my advice as General Counsel. This is the way we need to go. That's when you use your job title, right? And it can really bore you. I go, yeah, I am. And I do have to make the decision. Everybody who's really senior has to do these things. And I don't think they're ever 100% confident they've got it right and they've done the right thing. But they are drawing on lots of experience, lots of things that they know and knowledge, but knowing it's not going to be perfect. But you have to do something then, because otherwise the boat's going to fill with water. So you have to make that decision.
Is it fair to say then, if you might not have the knowledge, the importance of asking the question to the people that might know in your room that might not necessarily be as qualified? Because we had someone on a previous episode, Matt Porter, who spoke about being CEO of PDC and his initial experience also when he was a young CEO at a football club, is that he really stressed the importance of asking the right questions to people who maybe knew more than him in certain areas or subjects to then help him make informed decisions himself.
Yes, so I had a great team. I've always had work with great teams. One of the things you must always do is hire people who are smarter than you. If real leaders do that, right? Just always hire people that are smarter than you. If you are really good at leading, you will never fear anything. Why should you? It's your job to be surrounded by smart people for situations just like that. So I'd always rely, that's what I'm saying, listening to those who know, right? But they're not in a decision-making role. You are, right? So they may have a view, but it's not their decision. It's your decision. And that's a very different situation. So what I would say is that when you are in a position like that, you make sure you're surrounded by good people who are giving you good advice, and you feel that advice is good. Now, sometimes you inherit that team, and you might not have had a chance to test them out, but you'll know when you're in that situation, you test them out. If they're no good, change them and get the right team. But you really need that below you. So being the one who's the smart if you are the leader and you're the smart, you're the biggest expert in the team, you're not a leader. You should not be the expert, right? You should be a leader of experts. Right? Sport is probably different because you're doing something that does make you an expert. But I think when you are leading the team, you don't need to be the expert, but you do need to be able to understand things pretty quickly and analyze information really fast, certainly in my role. But you don't need to be the expert. And if you are, then I think you're in the wrong role, because and that's often happens, isn't it? They promote experts to be leaders and then they fail because it's very different skill set. So understanding you're not the expert and being comfortable you're not the expert is another thing. And particularly being Black and female, being comfortable that you're not the expert, where you know everyone is looking at every little thing you do and how you do it and whatever. It's not always a comfortable position to be in, but you get there and you think, no, this is what leaders do, right? And they have, their cabinet of people who advise them.
Sandie, I mean, this is fascinating. I've got so many notes here. This is mad. Listening to you and Will and the positions of the different worlds and the similarities, etc. It's just, it's really, really interesting, and I'm sure our community is really tuning in. And look, you've done so many amazing things. Chancellor, we haven't even mentioned Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. I mean, like, incredible. First Black woman in that position of General Counsel at the World Bank. I know you mentioned the first Briton in that position as well. The WOW Festival, like, if you don't know what it is and you're listening, please go and Google that, because that's incredible. Woman of the World, like, you were the chair of the foundation there, which is like an incredible movement. But all of these things are leading into me kind of having this kind of appetite to know more around EDI, because there's no way I'm going to let you go without talking to you about diversity inclusion, because it is my thing. The work I've been doing in sport, I'm really kind of like, eager to learn from you, because, in sport we've got, and it goes beyond sport, but there are people changing job titles in America right now because of the situation. They're losing the words equality, diversity, inclusion, and replacing them with other terms. People are very, very nervous about the situation that could be on us here in the UK. And of course, we have a global audience, so, people will kind of hopefully understand where I'm going with this. But, how can we at this time, such a sensitive time, continue to make progress when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and move from what many people may see as performative things to actually like really purposeful inclusion and diversity work that at its heart is about making business better?
Yeah. Well, so first off, I think that sort of starting with the obvious, which is clearly this has been working really well. Otherwise, people wouldn't be scared of it. Right? So it means it's worked.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Otherwise, nobody bothers with it. Stuff that doesn't work, nobody bothers with. Right? I remember there was a Sinclair C5 when I was a kid that was like a little car that came out. No one knows what that is now. Betamax video gone. Clearly stuff that works, it's working, it's made a difference, and that has scared some people, right? So take heart from the fact something worked. But it has been working so well and for so long that people are now missing it and want it back. It's become part of the DNA of what we do. And businesses know it makes great business sense, right? One thing is that in the life that we lead now, it's impossible not to be global if you've got a business and be successful, right? Impossible. Everything is global. It's very easy. You put it, you're on the internet, everything is global, which means all your customers are global, which means you need to be attuned to, if you want to sell something, you want to sell a service, you need to understand what your customers want, the cultural background, all of that. Whatever word you want to wrap around it, let's just start with your customers, right? And if you say, well, I really don't care whether my customers are male or female or what country they're in or whatever, you're not going to have very many customers for very long, right? You're just not. You're just not. And let me just go back to football. So when I was at the World Bank, and this was the first time I knew this, and I'd go to some amazing countries. I remember I was going to this school in Kenya, and they said the girls are going to ask you a question. And one of the questions is going to be, which football team do you support? And I said, but I'm in rural Kenya. No, football's a big deal. It's a big deal. Which Premier League team do you support? And I said, well, I'm going to say Crystal Palace. I said, oh, that's safe. You just can't say something like, Arsenal or Man United, because this creates real rivalry. All right. And I said, wow. And they said, yeah, football is international. And then when you look at the Premier League teams, for example, they really understand this. They know they've got fans that are watching, maybe 10 of them all together watching on one small TV in a little shop. But they know everything. And this is because when I grew up, football was really just, you watched it in the UK. You know what I mean? Now it's really international, right? And it appeals to an international audience. It appeals all over the world, and they're fans all over the world. And wherever you go, you will see, I used to work at Standard Chartered Bank, and we sponsored Liverpool. You'd see a Liverpool shirt with Standard Chartered on. You go, yeah, Standard Chartered is out there. You'd see all of this, because this is international and global. And anyone who doesn't understand this is walking around with their eyes shut. So just look at the customers. If you want to appeal to all your fans, all your customers, all your clients all over the world, if you don't start looking like them, if you don't start understanding if you don't understand that you market slightly differently here and slightly differently there, or you're even looking at demographics of who buys what, and then you think, oh, well, if lots of people buy this, we're going to appeal in this way, then you really shouldn't really be in business. Now, if you, for example, nearly everywhere I have worked in senior management, we've had in our buildings prayer rooms, because we understand that they're for staff, but they're also for customers who come in the door and they want to go to a prayer room. Right? Now, so if we hadn't had more diversity within our staff force, nobody would have said, oh, you need a prayer room because I need one and your clients will need one, and it shows that you're really thinking about them. Duh. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I come from that place, first of all, right? Yeah. If it doesn't make good business sense, there might be a good reason to do it, but it's got to make good business sense if you're doing it across your business. You want international customers, you want a global work, you've got to understand ED&I. Or you're going to say, I don't want to sell to women because I don't really care what you think. You're going to really say that to your customers?
No.
Because even if it's not a product for women, they may be buying it for the men, the sons, their uncles in their life. Right? So just start with that. Just start with that and see how far that gets you. Before you know it, you're into all of these things just by a different name, right? And then in order to service all these customers all over the world, you're going to need a very different looking workforce. And how are you going to attract that workforce then? Right. And that workforce and Gen Z and the rest of it, they want to go into a different environment that existed 20, 30 years ago. They don't want, they want a very different. So how are you going to do that? You just look at it that way and you get to the same place.
Sandie, I love that.
Now,
I love
that's
that,
just my
Sandie.
view.
No, I mean,
so don't be afraid.
We share a very similar view. I mean, like we're not talking about fluffiness. We're talking about doing business better.
Yeah,
right, ultimately, and
better.
I think that gets lost when we talk about diversity and inclusion often.
Yeah, for the world to come. For the world to come. And I have been incredibly lucky in my career and in the jobs I've done. I've got to visit so many different places in the world. And I have seen so many, different cultures in their home environment, et cetera, and there are so many similarities all over the world. But understanding it, you have to go and visit somewhere. You have to go and see. And people are marketed things slightly differently. People want things slightly differently. But understanding that, and you can make real faux pas if you don't understand it. You need someone in your team who's from so that I just think you get, to be honest, Will and Leon, I think you get to the same point, right? And if you think about who your customers are, what exactly is it you want to say to the customer, how we don't want to serve you anymore because you are? If you do, fine, but maybe people won't come to your store.
Yeah, you get lost in time, stuck in time. And you mentioned something so, again, powerful, I think, about for the world to come. So if we talk about you, Sandie, and I think this is a question that we get to every guest about the future and the legacy, and of course you're in a position of such power now. How do you want to go? What's your plans moving forward? Not just in your career, but I think with this power and understanding of the world moving forward.
Well, so first, as mentioned, I'm going to write a book about leadership and leading in challenging times, because when you said that about my CV, I'm like, yeah, but it's just a normal CV. But lots of people say, no, you have done some interesting things. Let's put it that way, right? And I thought a voice like mine has not really been heard in these sorts of books, with experience, with stories. It's just my story. Anyone, so that's what I want to do. So I'm busy writing that to get that out there. And I think I'm really interested in leadership. I think I'm really interested in telling these stories. And one of the things my son said to me, we're on a long car journey, right? And he's 24, so Gen Z, trapped in a car, they're brutally honest. And he said to me, Mum, I think Gen Z would really love to hear from you and your stories and your success and whatever. I said, what, from me? Really? He said, yeah, they really would. So cut a long story short, we've been filming some TikTok little videos on things that we're going to start launching in January. And he was like, this is how you do it. This is what you need to do, because people will want to hear from me. That's what I didn't believe, that people would want to hear from me of his generation. And he said, yes, because they're exactly the same. They want to be successful in their careers. They want to know how you did it. Nothing like that has changed. Just how you communicate that has changed. So you have to communicate it in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, big time. Well, I mean, Sandie, I mean, I'm looking at the clock, and actually we've run out of time, and I feel like we could keep talking for another hour quite easily, because we've kind of like touched on maybe 20% of your career within all of this. But the lessons, the learnings that you've shared with us have been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, confidence, resilience, kindness, embracing fear, authenticity, which I would love to have jumped into a little bit more. I mean, there are so many things that you've given us within this podcast. And Sandie, I know you've got some more thoughts to share with us. So before I close, I'll throw back to you, of course.
One more thing to round this up, if I may. And sorry for yabbering on. one of the highlights of my career was when I was at Standard Chartered Bank, and I interviewed Anthony Joshua for Black History Month, right? And he came in. He's wonderful, but we'd never met before. And when he first came on stage, and he sat down, obviously round of applause. He was nervous. I was nervous, right? I mean, imagine all the people he's been interviewed by, and I'm now interviewing him. So I said to him, look, AJ, one of the things we were discussing is, what do I call you? Right? Anthony, Mr. Joshua, AJ. And I said to my team, look, I'm an older Nigerian lady. He's a young Nigerian man. I can call him anything I want. But he can only call me one thing, and he went, Auntie.
I was just going to say it. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And that got such a round of applause.
Yes.
And everybody was tuning in from all over the world. And many people said, thank you for that cultural reference, because you hardly ever hear it in large financial institutions that are very American or very British. Right, that we all know that at home, but to suddenly have that broadcast, and he just relaxed, and he was like he was talking with his auntie, and we had a great time. But the fact he just went auntie with everybody from African or Caribbean or Asian descent just loved it. And that's coming back to, I think, a little bit of your question before, Leon, about authenticity, about bringing it all in for it to be meaningful, and understanding that cultural reference. And it brought everybody in, and everybody loved it. I just wanted to mention that because that's one of my highlights, and it brings everything together. I will shut up now.
No, that was. I'm very, very glad you got that in, and I'm hoping someone sends that clip to AJ to remind him of one of his aunties out
if
there.
If not, we will do that
him.
for sure.
We'll be sure to pass that on to. He's got another name,
Please
Femi,
do.
as well. Not many people use the Femi one, but he's got quite a few different ways of communicating with so many different audiences, which makes him such a great guy. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
One thing I thought we could do in closing here is kind of get our community, having listened to so many pearls of wisdom on purpose, to pause for a second and think about their own purpose. Think about their own purpose and how that shows up. Having listened to this podcast, having taken on all the things that you've highlighted, all the learnings, all the teachings, I would love our audience just to pause for a second and think about their own purpose and how that shows up. Drop it in the comments. Drop us a line. We love feedback. We love people who subscribe as well. So if you want to subscribe, if you want to share, comment, please get involved. This is a community we're building. And wow, what a community it is. So welcome to our community as well, Sandie. I should have said that at the beginning.
Thank you.
You're definitely a big part
Wonderful.
of it now.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything that you are doing. We look forward to continuing to follow your career. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for listening and watching. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. And definitely a role model now, Auntie Sandie. So thank you very much.
Thank you.